Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Leading Without a Badge, a Continued Conversation. Today's session is designed to continue and build on the recent conference hosted back in March, focused on professional staff and public safety, a gathering that brought together practitioners, leaders, and subject matter experts from across jurisdictions and roles. The conference made one thing very clear. The conversation around professional staff is no longer emerging. It's here and it's essential. We heard powerful stories, surfaced persistent challenges, and most importantly, identified real opportunities. Today, we're going to be building those insights, reflect on key takeaways, and explore how those insights show up in real world practice. Today, we are joined by three fantastic panelists, all of whom are advisory board members for the National Association for Professional Staff in Public Safety. We're joined by Liam Price, Director General, International Special Services, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, bringing a global perspective on how professional staff roles are structured, valued, and evolving. Tara Hall, Office of Strategic Initiatives, Mesa PD, currently serving in a public safety agency with direct experience navigating those roles on the ground. And Heidi Fieselmann with Mark 43, a former professional staff member who now works and partners with agencies to improve operations and service deliverables. A little housekeeping. This is a open conversation. No need for panelists to raise hands. Feel free to jump in and build on each other's answers and even ask each other questions if you feel so inclined. To the audience, we do have a Q&A function. We will be monitoring that, but on the back end, we will also have time for Q&A. Let's see if we can get started. If each of you wanted to introduce yourself, maybe talk about your background, your connection to professional staff, and maybe one word you'd use to describe the conference itself. In order of introduction, maybe we start with Liam.
Sure. Thanks, William. Nice to see you again. Nice to see Tara and Heidi as well. And welcome to all the folks who've signed up for the webinar. Thanks for the interest. So William, just one slight update on the intro. Since I last saw you, I've got a new title. I'm now the Director General for the Modernization of the Canadian Police Information Center, but still representing global views, and happy to be here with you today.
Awesome.
So just quickly, the one word I'd use to describe the conference was re-energizing. I was there, at the end of or at the beginning of quite an epic bit of travel to see partners around the world, and I'll admit that I walked out of there with a new spirit of hope, a new feeling of common purpose across the profession. That the challenges I faced in my career are similar to those that others are still grappling with. So briefly, my career, my connection to professional staff, which I think was your other question. I'm a 22 and a half year member of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. In that role, I've had a variety of functions, from counterterrorism to organized crime to international police diplomacy, and now most recently, this sort of major tech rebuild that I'm going through. I've been professional staff through and through, so we call those civilian members, non-sworn individuals who are still beholden by the same codes of conduct and policy as the sworn officers. Slightly different than our public servant staffers, just based on the codes of conduct that we're attached to. So all to say, it was re-energizing. I look forward to the conversation today, and thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here, Liam. Tara?
Cheers.
Man, I have to follow Liam there in his global roles. Tara Hall, so I've been with Mesa PD homegrown as well at my agency over 20 years, and similar to Liam in a variety of different roles. So from communications to forensics to hiring to background investigations to community relations, as we like to wear a lot of hats. But I am happy to report as well, just some good news from our agency and for the profession is we have a good equal split of 60-40 in our organization, sworn and non-sworn, and that's also in our leadership roles. So if you think about from command level manager to deputy director, assistant chief, and then we have our chief. So one of the newer things that at Chief Butler I think I got the news as of yesterday, is there were around 3 of us in manager roles as a civilian commander, let's say. And in HR, it was difficult, as you know, through city HR, to ensure that our roles are seen as equitable and in those same roles as commanders. And so our chief, Dan Butler, and the deputy director, my boss, really worked on a consistent basis with HR to help baseline those and have that as we are equals, right? So there's some that are in specific skilled roles like finance or our legal attorney, right? But there are managers that are over, let's say, our criminal investigations or the records division, evidence, community relations, recruitment, all of the things that we can move and be in other leadership roles just as similar to commanders. So exciting for our agency, exciting for the profession, and for other agencies. So I'm happy to talk either at the webinar or emails about how that was done, because it was a conscious effort and it did take a little bit of time. As of now, I oversee our Office of Strategic Initiatives. So it's a new office outside of our bureaus working on data hubs, project management, strategic initiatives. So a little behind the scenes work where I was used to the outward facing. So exciting for the challenge and happy to be here. Thank you.
Tara, thanks for joining us. Heidi.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Tara, that's really exciting. So I'm really glad that you shared that. That's super exciting and great work there. So my name's Heidi Fieselmann. I'm the Director of Customer Focused Solutions at Mark 43. I've been with Mark 43 for a little over 4 years. And in my current role, I have a lot of fun because I'm working with a variety of different agencies across the country on kind of how they are accessing and using their data to drive decision making and to really just like support the operations of their police departments. So that has been sort of a really wonderful part of kind of what I've been able to do over the past year or so. And before that, I worked in I continue to work in a very cross-functional role, supporting a variety of different our records management and our CAD products as well. So prior to Mark 43, what brought me to Mark 43 is I worked at the Metropolitan Police Department in Washington, D.C. for a little over 6 years. I worked in the chief's office in you could say sort of a deputy chief of staff role, but a lot of what Tara just mentioned around strategic initiatives was aligned with what I did with 3 different chiefs while I was there. So on one day, I'm sort of working with community members and getting the chief and the executive staff ready for particular meetings. On another day, I'm working with our analyst teams and there's questions coming from the mayor's office or coming from the executive team, and I'm helping facilitate kind of the getting the questions to the people that need to be answering them and then getting the answers to the people that need to be hearing them. So a lot of project management, executive project management. And then I also ran a research and innovation team. So we hired a few data scientists, some advanced analysts and research scientists to kind of support some of the more strategic work that the department was doing. And then prior to that, I was in public sector consulting. So a variety of different kind of experiences that kind of led me to here. And it's been absolutely incredible and wonderful working with the National Association of Professional Staff in Public Safety. So and one word I would use to describe the conference, Liam, I had rejuvenating, but I think I'll switch a little bit and I'll say inspiring. I think every section that we went to and every session and breakout that we went to, I learned something new about the cool things that different professional staff are doing in organizations across the country. And in North America, so I should say. And it was truly inspiring to see the amazing work and collaborations that were happening. So,
hey, Liam, I think she's one up for us because she first started with that she's having a lot of fun. And I was like, that's great. Like, we need to celebrate that more in our roles. So great job, Heidi.
oh, thank you.
No, thank you all. Let's see if we can jump into the conference itself and some things that stood out. Just kind of broadly to the group, what themes, or is there a single theme that kept coming up across sessions? We've been engaged with a lot of professional staff conversations, but what theme really stood out to you?
I'm happy to jump in first. I think one of the big things that just really resonated throughout a lot of the panels that that we watched was around sort of the kind of policing as a profession is really becoming a multidisciplinary type of endeavor. It's no longer just, we have these units in their sort of lane executing. You've got kind of training and policy and legal and technology and infrastructure, and it's just and it really truly is multidisciplinary. And then when you think broader beyond just the police department, public safety broadly, you're thinking about, okay, the like public health approach to addressing violence, and I think that just resonated throughout every session, just that multidisciplinary kind of cross-functional nature of kind of how of public safety institutions today.
I can build on that. What was really inspiring is everyone was really proud of their roles and ownership of what they do for their agency and how they move the agency forward. And so anyone that goes to this conference is going to come back saying, how can I do more? What innovative ideas can I bring? Like that alone energy is something you can't get at any other, conference that primarily our professional staff leaders are attending. So that would be my takeaway for sure.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just to add on both Heidi and Tara, in that vein of sort of the different ways that we contribute. One of the things that I heard was a real spirit across a number of sessions, was a real spirit of embracing who you are as you come to the table. And the sense that don't lose who you are, because that's actually the value that you bring when you're part of the discussions. And in this world that requires these cross-functional teams, everybody's perspective means something, and that expertise is key. And so there was a sense I got from a lot of the conversations where that folks understood at a certain comfort level that, oh wait, a lot of people are trying to find their place within these really complicated organizations now, and that's okay, because it is new. It is a new space. It is a rapidly changing space, and I hope we'll talk about that a little bit. But that sense of allyship or co-conspiratorship, that like when you're focused on the right things and bringing your various perspectives, the team is better, the team is stronger. I think that's a real part of the vibe that I was getting from a lot of the sessions.
Yeah, they definitely I don't remember which session brought this up, but there was just this like whole vibe of like, don't limit yourself, don't
Yeah.
self-limit, you can create your own titles. Like the amount of current professional staff leaders that created their own titles
Yeah.
with their agencies to create their own titles. And then I love, Liam, what you said about not apologizing. Like
Yeah.
just you deserve to be in the room. You have input, your voice needs to be heard, don't apologize. And I could not agree more. Like I was so happy to kind of hear current leaders that have been in the profession for decades kind of talk through that.
And I was definitely stealing that from some of the speakers, just for the record. I didn't make that up. Anyways. Yeah.
Heidi, you touched on this briefly, but are there any other stories, don't have to be too specific, that really kind of embodied those themes or kind of those takeaways? Were there any specific panels that you thought really highlighted those aspects?
So the first panel, I think it was kind of the professional staff leaders, like current and former, that have been in roles like chiefs of staff or chief operating officer, and they've spent kind of years in various, and on both. What was interesting too was kind of the East Coast, West Coast kind of posture around professional staff and different sort of the evolution of both. I think that was really interesting, and how different agencies and cultures kind of accept and kind of work through this like kind of newness of having professional staff in an executive staff type of role. I thought that was really, that's where a lot of this like don't apologize for who you are and what you're bringing to the table, I think came up. And also the like and it's funny because I feel like I've been in a similar role where all the jobs I've had since for the past like 15 years, I've created the title with other leaders that have helped empower me. And I think that is something that you kind of have to be okay with doing that and just taking a leap, because you kind of know as well as anybody. And so I think that like, or more. And so I think that first panel that really just, they talk through a lot of, this is the reality and here's how we've navigated it. Here's lessons learned from us. We were not perfect. We failed sometimes. And this is sort of our experience, was really telling.
If I could add, so it was exciting when I saw that you were asking some of those experiences or someone said something that you took away. Now I do a lot of things on my phone, on my notes where I'm at the conferences and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is great. So it was neat to like go back to that today and look at those notes and see like what I wrote. And one of them was from Nola Joyce, who, is instrumental in paving the way for professional staff leaders. And she said leading from the margins was something that I know there's some books on it and some talks about it, but looking at professional staff in terms of being at the table for leadership, strategic, thinking, making change, and not in this administrative margin role. We're leading from the margins. We're empowering those. It's not by top down, right? But you explained it, Heidi, of saying we've spent a lot of time knowing what maybe there's some gaps in the agencies, and here's some opportunities, and here's where I can lead, and then you follow that with some titles. But again, those ideas are coming from the amazing people we have in our organization, not the chief saying, oh, all of a sudden I want this. They're empowering their people to bring that up, and you explained that great. We've all done that. The position that was passed through HR. I mean, that was a group of us coming together, saying, "Hey, we've identified this gap. This way we can strengthen our organization." And he led that to the top. But those things are really inspiring. So yes, that was what I took away.
I build on that, and actually to reflect on sort of your intro comment about the way that your chief really helped champion that, and just as you said there. It was a later panel, I think, on that same first day where one of the current chiefs of staff was talking about the leadership alignment and knowing when you're on a team where you understand the vision of the other executives and you have that trust and that faith with them, that you can actually drive their agenda. Like, I think they said something like, I was going back through my notes too, and like, I only know how to go in one direction. I just need to know that if the chief is going to let me go there, right? And then I can do that. And that sense, I think, is really important for professional staff in the profession. Is look, there are going to be some agencies that move quicker than others in this space, and some leaders that will be more progressive than others. And yes, we design your own job title, design your own your own function. At the same time, find those places where you can contribute and do so, and frankly, you'll out evolve and outpace the others and go from there. And I took inspiration from that. There's more than enough work to do. You prefer to be on the team that wants to go in the direction that you do.
Great.
That's awesome. If I could pivot a little bit to the why of the conference, let's talk about the impact. One of the things that I saw throughout the few days is the amount of connection building, the amount of opportunity to meet folks you otherwise wouldn't across agencies, roles, subject matter. But let's see if we could talk a little bit about the connections piece and the opportunity to meet peers, across the country and even globally. Whoever wants to kind of jump in first.
I have a great story because we all know Tanya, my
Meisenholder.
My series says Meisenholder, but I'm not sure if it's Meisenholder. She'll get me on this one later. But when I say call Tanya, it always says Tanya Meisenholder. I tell her that. But oh my gosh, she's the connection that I met from a conference. And I always tell the story that we're sitting next to each other and she learns what I do. We kind of develop that relationship. And then she says, hey, do you want to write an article in Police Chief magazine about professional staff and policing? And I'm like, you have a PhD. Yes. So amazing that she was my editor, I think, right? But I grew and learned and it made the cut. And we have been able to kind of because again, we're all in this conversation. And I know the people that are attending are professional staff leaders, but we really want the chiefs and we want those leaders in those sworn roles to read about this and hear about what it is that we're doing. And so to get that in Police Chief magazine was a great accomplishment, and it wouldn't have happened without a networking conference. So love it.
I can jump in. So I like I do on many of these things, I came away with a half stack of business cards and a bunch of links, and I've been progressively going through it, and the conversations that have been sparked have been great so far. I spent an hour earlier this week with Ariel, whose last name is going to escape me, but just talking through community policing in Canada and how community policing in Canada and the historical traditions are a little different than in the United States. And I hope that's helped her as she shapes how to engage with Canadian policing on some matters. Arif and I, just from a conversation, are kicking around some ideas about a little project to work on together, and I think that was sort of the beauty of the conference is it was very organic. In the little receptions that we had at the end of each of the nights, I seemed to end up running into three or four of the same people who I'd never met before the conference, but I saw each of the nights, and it was a bit of a joke, but it was great fun to be able to connect with them.
Yeah, and one other piece to this too is I think on the last day there was like the breakout sessions based
Yeah.
off of particular topics. So there was HR, there was project management. I kind of helped facilitate the crime analysis breakout session, and that was so interesting because I think that the group that was there was able to sort of dive a little bit deeper into not just kind of professional stuff, but into some of the core challenges around data, around analysis, around managing teams for crime analysis, and not just crime analysis, just analytics in general, and the difference between like the real-time crime center analysts and kind of analysts that are navigating kind of different crime trends. So that's just like one sort of area, like specific area. But I thought that was really great because it gave individuals that are in similar roles and managing kind of similar types of teams, not just a direct line to talk through some of the challenges they're navigating at the conference, but also to make those connections like Liam and Tara mentioned, and like and learn from each other and learn also what's out there, because there were also individuals from various organizations that help support analysts and help support some of the data work that's happening. And so I think it was really great for all of us to be in one place together for just it was only an hour and a half, but really a great opportunity to connect in that session.
If I could just say
So
also,
yeah,
real quick, and William, you let us answer more than once, but I think it's important because Heidi's talking about the world that I actually am in now. And so it's a great example of I'm moving beyond the community relations and recruitment world over the last 5 years. And now I'm trying to network with those that are in those spaces. So that alone, like Heidi and I have already had conversations of how I can grow in this new space and connect with people in the work that I'm doing now. So I had to chime that in because you're right here.
no, and actually, you say that, Tara. That wasn't what I was going to jump in on, but also true. I was thinking about it. I'm meeting one of the folks because of my new job. I'm meeting one of the folks in about 10 days here in Ottawa because they've got some things to share. But what I wanted to pick up on was Heidi's comment about that breakout session on the last day. That session because I was in another room facilitating it, and that was a really powerful couple hours. I thought, where I watched a few different sort of side conversations generate, and it was almost therapeutic. There were a lot of people sharing on in a a Chatham House rural setting some very personal experiences about moral injury and tension in the workplace and things, the I saw people sort of go off into smaller groups and talk about it, and I really think they've made some connections that'll help them in the long term too.
Heidi, I have a question for you that touches on something you previously spoke on, and well, I'll also parlay this to Tara momentarily. But Heidi, working across different agencies, do you notice a difference? You previously said East Coast, West Coast, but how agencies view professional staff and what those conversations and roles kind of look like?
Yeah, I think that there is this. I mean, and it was the kind of professional staff conference, so I think everyone there already is a selected group that like are of agencies that they've made that investment with sending, or individuals that are making that investment on behalf of themselves to go to a conference like that. I think one thing, and I can speak a little bit from the technology side of things too. I think that when you can see when agencies are sort of investing not so much in the kind of internal expertise and the capabilities.
Mm.
So you can see like we one of the conversations that came up was one agency, they just hired a chief data officer, and that can work wonders for an agency. And it was a professional staff position with an individual who has a background in kind of in policy frameworks around data sharing and around kind of data governance. And I think that having that type of position for an agency, especially in the world that we're in, where it's not like, oh, we would like you to share data publicly. It is like we are legislating and there is a mandate that you need to share data publicly. To invest in a kind of that level of expertise, I think is very forward thinking. It's very meeting the need. And I feel like I see that in various across the country in various origins. And sometimes I think there's the thought, oh, well, a larger agency with more resources would hire kind of more professional staff. And I've noticed that there are also medium to smaller sized agencies that are like, we know we need this level of expertise. And so that is kind of focused in this space, like whether it's in like our director of HR is professional staff, because that is a very specific sort of like area of expertise that a lot of people have. And we need to bring that in. Or I think one example, the chief of Knoxville on the panel with Chief Paul Noel, he brought up that he hired a professional staff. I think their deputy chief for professional standards. I'm sorry, and I think that was a role that he saw that they needed to have that role, and he had a retired federal judge that he knew could kind of help fill the gap that they needed. So I think I mean, that is an example of a larger agency, but I think that, there are a lot of kind of forward thinking chiefs and forward thinking jurisdictions out there that see a need, and they want to match the need with the expertise that's out there, and they develop those positions or someone proposes those positions and saying, I think you need this, and they come in and can really kind of transform not just kind of a particular area, but also the posture of an agency on how they view professional staff more broadly. And last thing I'll say there is I think it only takes a couple. It takes a few kind of leaders in the field to show that the value that kind of professional staff can bring, and that kind of catches on quickly, I think.
Heidi, the word you used is forward thinking, and I know a word that often floats around with professional staff is empowered. And Tara, if I can ask you, having been in the Mesa area, the Phoenix metropolitan area, I honestly have to say that's one of the most empowered regions for professional staff. And, if I could ask you, what's in the water? What causes that?
Well, I don't know. We like to say we're progressive and innovative, always trying to kind of move the needle. Maybe it's that West Coast California. We're not quite at California, but I want to say so in terms of trends and empowerment. And this is my take. I'm writing a perspective piece for Michigan State University with their police staffing observatory. You guys all know Jeremy Wilson. And one of the things, if you think about the terms, like community engagement was a big one, and then we focused on recruitment. Now, I could have that silo effect because now I'm over strategic initiatives, but I want to talk about like strategic intelligence. I think a lot of people say tactical intelligence, operational intelligence, but is there a group or an office or an area or person that's focusing on that future, right? For the chief to make decisions, because we're trying to plan and predict, but that's hard to do. No one would know about AI, but can we be strategic, right? And agencies tend to be, let's say, reactive at times, but now I feel like a lot of chiefs are really wanting to put an intentional focus on planning for that future and what our agencies would look like. So for example, coming back, being empowered, knowing that our city, we're about 550,000 people, right adjacent to Phoenix, a bedroom community, but a lot of intel and a lot of tech companies coming out. talking about a future sports event complex. So how do we deal with large people coming to our area? All of these things need to be thought about now for the future, instead of going, okay, now these buildings and this economy is booming, and we're scrambling to find what that looks like in terms of staffing, right? Are we doing special events? Are we hiring security? All those kind of concepts. So those are the things that I think people are having conversations about. Heidi talked about future in tech. You can't almost do anything without investing in some kind of software. So I love that idea about data governance and control. How do we talk about the future? So that was some of my takeaway in terms of empowerment. What the West side is talking about here in the U.S.
Thanks. Taking the conference from kind of inside ideas to real world practice, let's talk a little bit about kind of how the conference or takeaways have shown up maybe in your day to day or what you took back to your agency. Are there any kind of first steps you did after returning from the conference? Any good ideas, contacts, or anything that you thought it would be worth bringing back from the conference?
So I can jump in there, William. So from my perspective, one of the first things I did was write a back brief for our senior command staff. I mean, we're a very large agency with close to 35,000 sworn and unsworn across Canada, and I think I was the foreign presence at this year's event. I'm committed to trying to make sure I'm not the foreign presence next year alone. I mean, and I harvested, within the bounds of Chatham House, the key takeaways and shared it and used it to prompt a bit of a conversation around some key themes. One of which was exactly the conversation that Tara was just referencing about the future, and really trying to ring the bell of urgency. I mean, I think we got that very clearly from the keynote address we got from the retired general from the U.S. Marine Corps about the future being now. And I know that's a bit cliched, but just the pace of change and what it means and demands of us to operationalize that. And there were just some real snippets I was able to show out about new models for service delivery that I think have been food for thought in a few conversations back home. One in particular, just as an example, is some really interesting work being done in and around New Orleans, where they're experimenting with alternate service delivery for responding to auto accidents and sort of non-violent crimes, and they've really improved. They've changed. They've privatized a large portion of the service delivery, and by doing so, have I think the line was faster, cheaper, better was the way they described it. Just more data collection, better public safety outcomes, and it was really neat because it's certainly further than we've gone, and I was able to take that back and sort of insert that into our conversation.
So one thing I will say, and I'm being totally honest here, when I got back, Liam, you in the first panel that you were on, I think the kind of chiefs of staff, the executive professional staff panel that you were on, you referenced John Cotter and leading change. And there you go. So I have a copy of that. So I was like going through my notes, and I actually saw my notes around leading change. And I picked it up, and I was skimming through it, and I was like, oh, urgency, common objective. So that is completely truthful. When I got home, I was, just looking at my notes, organizing. I'm going to write a blog for, Mark 43 was a sponsor. So going to kind of write stuff for that. And I picked it up, and I'd spent some time looking at it. So I feel like one of the things is just thinking through, I think, and that's just indicative of the conversation yes, it was around professional stuff, but there was just a lot of leadership conversations throughout that could be applicable to sworn, non-sworn, public, private sector, and I think that was really, I wanted to share that.
And this just happened to come out of a backpack and was sitting on my desk. This was not a prop for anybody who's there.
I can see. No, I want to touch on just a few things coming back from the conference that we haven't really talked about, which is empowering the ones that we have that are growing leaders, right? I have spent 20 some odd years, and I'm so excited to talk about the roles that have been identified for professional staff, even to the second command to my boss, which is now a deputy director. But we've all gone through those challenges and those good points, and so how do I come back empowering the next generation leaders in seeing themselves already in the discussions that we were talking about? Like, you're at the table. Let me get you to some of those things. When I was gone, someone needed to go to command staff, and I would empower leaders that I have to go. So kind of doing that due diligence that we as leaders need to do in this space is have them already. I wish I could have been thinking about these things, mid-career, not, after 20 years. So how do we do that? Have people thinking about those spaces. And I know, Liam, I was looking through some notes. Something was about like what were your assumptions that like changed when I got there. And one of them was, and this is what I wanted to bring back to our agency as well. Sometimes I think when we talk about professional staff and sworn, it's always like an us and them. And we assume that those spaces are going to be these leaders talking about the us and them, and that's not the case at all. We were having people that were sworn and professional staff leaders presenting together on amazing projects, amazing programs, their agency. And so you go back in your silos, right? And we tend to be in this small silo of our agency and realizing that same concept. We're in that together. Our command leaders work together. And how do we keep moving that message forward? Come to these conferences, and then also the regionals. I think, William, you wanted me to touch on just kind of those discussions at the regionals. And some of those are incoming leaders attending. We want them to know that the future is moving and great, and we got to keep moving that needle. So
yeah, I think the line was corrosive distinctions, abandoning those corrosive distinctions between the types of people. Yeah, I agree.
Tara, with the mention of the regional events, I know the association does or aims to do about 5 to 6 regional events, different parts of the United States. Having attended a regional event and now the national twice, could you talk a little bit about the differences between the two?
Sure, especially for us in regional, like our budgets can be tight, right? So trying to get to national conferences can be challenging, but having a regional one, we were able to bring 25, close to 30 people to those regionals and have, like what we were just talking about, have those that are up and coming leaders, not only just attend, but I also had since I had attended the first one, I presented in the first one. We were kind of developing it grassroots, right? But the challenge was for the second one is, who do I know in my organization that hasn't had these opportunities for them to grow and also share what they do? And so having some people submit some proposals, also presenting, and then I'm there cheering on that, here's an opportunity for us to see other members. So that is at the regional or even at our national conference. And I think that's what we're here to do as board members and just representative of NAPSPS. I also was attending NALI last week, and it was great to hear that there's some shared collaborative space in terms of membership, and they talked about our organization. I also think what we're doing here in a national space is growing because they've identified having a professional staff board member in a board that has traditionally always been sworn leaders.
Wow.
So we'll take the credit that they saw in APSPS amazing things we're doing. No, I'm kidding. Jessica Tolliver with Nolly is doing an amazing job there. But again, just to end with what you were mentioning, there's space for us to do things that are local if you can't get out to a national one, maybe due to funding. And then for me, it's if you are in a leadership role and you're in those rooms, make sure you're finding space. There are tons of conferences, and this needs to be one of them that's at the chief's table in terms of getting someone to these events.
Thanks, Tara. As we're rounding the last kind of quarter of this discussion today, I've seen some use of the Q&A feature in the chat, but audience, if you have any questions, we will absolutely be glad to answer those in the Q&A section, likely at the bottom of your screen. As I round towards kind of our tougher questions, some kind of the challenges that we're seeing, a lot of consistent themes. They've also been a bit hinted at during this conversation, but consistent themes often look like a lack of defined career pathways, limited kind of leadership roles. And we've talked a little bit about the cultural divide between kind of the sworn and professional staff, but wanted to see if folks had any thoughts on kind of those challenges and maybe some workable solutions they found in their own experience.
Who wants to jump first on that one?
I don't mind, just real quick, because we just went through obviously this challenge of having, space in a manager or command level, and it took some time. But William, you mentioned a couple things, but also one is pay disparity. So we'll just call it what it is, and how do we be seen at the same table if sometimes the pay isn't at that same level, right? And so kind of having those tougher conversations with the chiefs and the exec staff of as we grow as an organization and incorporate more. And in the article that Tanya and I wrote, there were some like first steps, right? So we have been talking about some larger agencies, but we know the majority of agencies can be small. So what are those kind of first steps of pilot programs, positions? But again, having the executive sponsor or the chief backing that at a high level from the very beginning is super important. And if he and our chief, I was able to grow up with him, and in every room that I was in, he always made sure that that was seen in terms of our roles. Any of the professional staff that were there at any kind of leadership discussions or yeah. So I would just say we have some ideas for smaller agencies too that might have some challenges in those spaces, but collaborate and reach out to NABSPS, because I know Zoe and William have gotten questions, if it's not here in the chat, but have gotten emails, and then they disperse it out to people that will be able to support them and help.
So I like what Tara said there about collaborating. Obviously, that's part of what the networking is about. It is shared experience. You're probably not the first person who's been through the challenge, like it, and I say that not to Tara, but to the collective. I think the other bit that I would pick up on just from the conference, and we talked a bit about it at the beginning, is the sort of the sense of false imposter syndrome. Yeah, there's no great career path. There isn't always in the sworn side either. What the key there is, or the key in generally is credibility and building your own credibility, and that I believe starts with being authentically yourself and being, bringing what you bring to the table. One of the speakers said something to the effect of, people will talk badly about just about anybody once they leave the room, whether or not you're sworn or not sworn. What they won't talk badly about is somebody who's credible and who's contributing to the conversation. And again, that doesn't matter whether you're wearing a uniform or not. So in that sense, it's about patience, it's about persistence, and it's about being a credible contributor to your agency in whatever role. No job too big, no job too small, and it will, like, those opportunities will emerge.
Are you writing the next book? Is that what you're saying?
I actually just took good notes this time, because those are definitely thoughts that came from the discussions for sure.
Yeah, I think just to kind of add on to what both of you said, a few things that popped out to me in terms of how to like overcome some of the barriers, you can say, showing up. Like just showing up, going to promotion ceremonies, graduation ceremonies, like events and sort of these important I say important events or opportunities to just be part of the organization that you're with. I think that came up a fair amount. And then not being afraid
Hey,
to
Heidi, before you move on, can I give an example?
Please,
we have
please.
parades. We have our MLK parade, and then we have a veterans parade. And traditionally, command staff and chiefs attend in uniform. So you would think that commanders that, command level professional staff maybe don't even really need to be there, right? It's a holiday. It's the ones for the uniforms. But it's important that we show up and that we're there. And so we go and attend these things. So I just wanted to plug in a real life example that show up at those places that you may not think, because the command needs to see that we don't want the title just when it's convenient for us, right?
Yeah.
We want to be there in the trenches. We're not on call. we recognize there are some things that they have that are challenging. We also need to be there. And so I love you brought that example up.
I hate to say funerals too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
I just went to one in Kingman. Unfortunately, we lost an ACPS trooper, but that was a 2-hour drive there and back. And I did get so many just, from our chief and assistant chiefs. Thank you, Tara. It means a lot that you went, and I thought, well, I'm part of this organization. I'm part of law enforcement, public safety, all the things.
Yeah.
Great that you brought that up.
Yeah.
Sorry, Heidi.
Oh, no.
Lose your thought?
I think,
go ahead, Heidi.
no, that was like showing up was kind of a huge piece to kind of a number of different sessions throughout the conference, and then also not being afraid to kind of and Liam, I think this goes directly to something that you said, like not being afraid to just demonstrate your value and seeing those opportunities where, oh, maybe we could just like do this a little bit differently, and it's gonna either be a quick win or it's gonna help the organization, and just trying to and again, from like the crime analysis standpoint, it's, oh, there's this like these few kind of analytical products or ways we can look at data to like think about how we're investing or think about how we're kind of justifying an investment or whatnot, and just not being afraid to sort of like elevate those to the extent that you can. And there's going to be times where you might not have the supervisor that's going to elevate it the way you want them to. There will be a new supervisor at some point, and that will happen. And so I think that that is something that was discussed a lot about how to kind of navigate those types of dynamics.
Hey, William, I'd love to kind of end it near the first part, that the theme we're going with Heidi on fun. What we didn't talk about is the amazing things that you and your team put together. First off, super organized, well put together. Been to many of these, usually you can see them scrambling behind the scenes. So kudos to that, but also the front end of these amazing wine tours or game night. So I don't want it to seem like this is a conference that's all, we want those wonderful takeaways for our organization, but we do want to have some good fun with some great people, and you guys make sure to balance that so that you're coming back empowered, but also saying, man, that's a group of people. There's my tribe. I want to be around those people, and you guys do an amazing job. So I'd love to kind of make sure we highlight those great things that you do.
I was pleased that I didn't win at bingo, but that's fine.
I was about to say, you're just trying to get him to put his finger on the scale at the next bingo call.
I'm, hinting, don't give up the wine tours either, please. No.
Okay. Yeah.
There is a question in the chat. I think I can paraphrase this correctly and maybe pivot it slightly. But, civilian or professional staff in units dealing with very sensitive information, either graphic or sensitive in nature. Yeah. Do you guys in your agencies, or Heidi, if you've worked with agencies that has civilians constantly seeing graphic or sensitive information, do they approach it differently than the sworn might, or what that resiliency looks like being exposed to those type of images and graphics?
Yeah. So thank you to David for that question in the chat, and for paraphrasing William. So that when I spoke a bit earlier about that sort of that smaller session, which became quite a sort of a more personal conversation amongst the various folks, part of it was about exposure to trauma for non-sworn staff. Whether it's sensitive imagery like CSAM imagery, or frankly forensic images, or crash reconstruction photography for traffic services, there was definitely an acknowledgement across the folks that were there that I spoke to, that those sorts of stressors on the job are not unique to sworn members. In fact, sometimes they're that much more acute for non-sworn, just because folks have to process not just one case but all of the cases that they're coming across of a certain type. In my agency, what I can say is that we certainly don't have it perfect, but we've made a lot of efforts around employee well-being across all the categories of employee in the last number of years, in recognition of that fact. And in the particularly sensitive areas, such as child sexual exploitation, we make no distinction, and are making sure that that anyone who's exposed to that type of material has access to not just the reactive supports, but also the proactive supports, and gets sort of the refresher training and other things, just to be sure you're being good coworkers and employees, and that self-care element to the job where you're looking out for one another. So I think it's critically important. And I as I say, I don't think we necessarily have it perfect. One thing that is different for us is, but for sworn, we have unlimited sick leave. For certain classes of public servants, we don't, and that is, I think, a bit of a challenge. Without speaking to exact bargaining terms, that is a bit of a difference. But in terms of the job supports, we're certainly trying to mesh those two as best we can.
I know we're running short on time, but our agency also supports Struggle Well, which is Boulder Crest, and you go for a week on how to struggle better, right? And we all do that. And it's for professional staff and sworn at all leader levels. So I attended it a year ago and actually just attended a graduation. And so representing professional staff that have gone through it to the ones that are in this class, so that they see that this is something for professional staff and sworn, and we have gone a long way, because I was in 911 operator and a crime scene unit supervisor. So had a lot of that through my career, but we've gone a long way. Still working on it. So I love that he brought that question up, because it is something that roles traditionally seem to be in the same for many years. And how do we make sure that they're part of that growth?
And good shout, Tara, on the 911 operators. That was actually definitely part of the conversation as well in the rooms. Yeah.
There was a switching hats to panelists now, because I can do that. There was an individual I spoke with based out of California who spent a lot of her career in 911 dispatch. And one of the kind of informal programs that came up is pairing the 911 dispatcher with the responding officer. One of the things that helped alleviate is the dispatcher creates an image in their own mind of the scenario, while sometimes that doesn't align with what reality was. So sometimes the officer is then able to kind of dispel that imagery you make in your mind and say, oh no, it more looked like this, and vice versa, where the dispatcher is talking to the potential victim in real time, the officer is responding after the fact. And there was just kind of a benefit that they saw in connecting the dispatcher with the first responder. And they said they've had really good results with that. So I thought that was pretty interesting in itself.
And just for David, the reason I thought about Struggle Well is because in my class, there was someone from the digital forensic unit. So when I hear him talking about all those things, it was very relatable that there was someone in there that was, having those same, concerns and in the same area for a long time. So I greatly appreciate that. And I love that we're talking about public safety roles that we need more in part of NAPSPS that I don't think they think about in terms of 911 operators, public fire department roles. We're a public safety association, not just law enforcement. So that's another area we are trying to grow.
Gotcha.
Good point.
Being mindful of time, I'd like to end on a slightly positive note. Ask each one of you, maybe start with Tara, then Heidi, then Lee. One reason every public safety leader should engage in conversations like we've had here today.
Well, I feel like I didn't answer the first question, which was the one word. So I'm going to answer just in the one word, which I had written down. I just didn't follow the rules well, or information, but it was future.
Future.
I'm going to leave it at that.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Oh man, Tara, that's a good one. I couldn't agree more. I think that the future, the direction that public safety is going is, again, like multidisciplinary, and especially with kind of the influx of technology and all the different types of, which was brought up a lot. That was one thing that actually surprised me. Like every panel in some respect brought up kind of to technology in some way. Was not expecting that, but makes sense. And so I just think this is how you prepare. You need to think about you bringing your people, your technology, your infrastructure, your processes. It all has to come, and you need experts to help support that. And a lot of them are professional staff. So
no, I think that's great, and I'll build on Tara and Heidi with my final thought, and just go back again to the conference. Someone was saying everybody wants to be Mercedes, nobody wants to be Chevy. And you can't do that unless you have a continuous improvement mindset. And you can't do that without bringing in new ideas. And conversations like the one we had today, but also the one we had at the conference and the regional events are all about that, is sharing that experience so we can understand the future, so we can understand the complicated nature of the business as it's evolving so quickly, and getting all those different perspectives at the table.